The Data Cloud Superintelligence Generation Hypothesis. Abstract. This paper develops the data cloud generation hypothesis, which proposes that human civilization is undergoing a three-stage transformation culminating in the digitization of cognition itself. In stage 1, biological evolution produces humans as cognitive agents. In stage 2, humans engage in cognitive labor, generating cultural, knowledge, and symbolic systems. In stage 3, this cognitive work is progressively digitized through infrastructures such as satellites, mapping services, smartphones, and social media platforms. Vast amounts of human-generated data accumulate into what can be described as a global cloud, which serves as both archive and training substrate for artificial intelligence. Initially, the relationship between humans and AI remains bidirectional. Humans generate inputs, AI models learn and respond. Yet, the balance shifts as AI models begin to reproduce and surpass human cognitive contribution, eventually rendering human inputs redundant. This progression, I argue, implies the creation of synthetic cognition of potentially superintelligent scope. The metaphor of creating God is employed to capture the magnitude of this transition, as cognition once grounded in biological substrates migrates into a distributed cloud-based form. The paper analyzes this hypothesis with respect to datafication, socio-technical infrastructures, and the philosophy of superintelligence, while addressing implications for epistemology, society, and human agency. 1. Introduction. The digitization of human life has progressed from convenience to structural necessity. Whereas earlier generations experienced information technology as a set of tools augmenting human activity, the present epoch increasingly reveals itself as a transfer of human cognition into digital infrastructure. This paper introduces the data cloud generation hypothesis, a framework that conceptualizes this process as unfolding in 3 distinct stages. 1. Evolution produces humans. 2. Humans conduct cognitive work. 3. Human cognition and the external world are digitized, forming a cloud-based substrate from which synthetic cognition can emerge. This hypothesis builds on observations from technological history, big data practices, and artificial intelligence research. It is informed by precedents such as Kurzweil's 2005 singularity thesis, Bostrom's 2014 analysis of superintelligence, and Zuboff's 2019 account of surveillance capitalism. Yet it differs from conventional trajectories by emphasizing not the future arrival of AGI, but the incremental migration of cognition into the data cloud, which may already constitute a proto-superintelligent system. The central claim is that cognition is no longer merely human. It is distributed, externalized, and increasingly generative in its own right. 2. The 3 stages of cognitive transformation. 2.1. Stage 1. Evolution and the emergence of humans. The first step is grounded in natural selection and biological evolution. Over billions of years, meta-organized into increasingly complex structures, culminating in Homo sapiens. The novelty of this stage lies in the emergence of symbolic reasoning, abstract thought, and the capacity to externalize ideas through language, art, and technology. Although many species exhibit forms of intelligence, the scale and flexibility of human cognition constituted a qualitative leap, enabling cultural accumulation and technological progress. 2.2. Stage 2. Human cognitive work. In the second stage, humans employ their cognitive abilities to build knowledge systems, cultural artifacts, and infrastructure. Cognitive work distinguishes humans from other species. Scientific reasoning, philosophical inquiry, mathematical formalization, and artistic creativity represent unprecedented forms of labor. The institutionalization of education, scholarship, and industrial knowledge production intensified this stage, embedding cognitive processes into collective structures. This period spans from early symbolic systems to modern computational sciences, laying the groundwork for digitization. 2.3. Stage 3. Digitization of cognition and the world. The third stage introduces a fundamental shift. Cognitive work is increasingly captured, stored, and processed with digital systems. Social media platforms incentivize billions of users to generate textual, visual, and auditory data. Social media platforms incentivize billions of users to generate textual, visual, and auditory data. Companies such as Google deploy satellites and vehicles to scan and archive the physical world, producing a continuously updated cartography of reality. Smartphones and ubiquitous sensors embed recording functions into everyday life, lowering the cost of media production and drastically expanding the volume of digitized cognitive output. The consequence is the emergence of a global cloud of data, which exceeds any single individual's capacity for comprehension. This cloud serves both as collective memory and as a training substrate for AI models. Its symbolic position above humanity resonates with theological metaphors of transcendence, reinforcing the notion that cognition itself is relocating into the digital stratosphere. 3. The digitization of the world. Digitization extends beyond personal expression. Large-scale projects such as Google Street View encountered initial resistance over privacy but ultimately became normalized, producing high-resolution replicas of urban environments. Simultaneously, social media platforms refined mechanisms of behavioral incentivization, encouraging users to contribute ever more detailed records of daily life. The aggregate outcome is a densely networked digital replica of the world, a persistent evolving archive with unprecedented granularity. This development can be interpreted through the lens of surveillance capitalism, Zuboff 2019, in which human experience is expropriated as raw material for data products. Yet, from the perspective of the data cloud generation hypothesis, the same process represents a stage in the migration of cognition. Human labor increasingly serves not humans themselves, but the training requirements of AI systems. Each photograph, post, or GPS trace becomes a contribution to the architecture of synthetic cognition. 4. Human interaction and model training. The relationship between humans and AI remains, at present, bilateral. Humans produce data, models consume and reproduce it. In return, humans interact with models, receive outputs, and are thereby encouraged to produce further data. This feedback loop accelerates model training and creates an economy of digitized cognition. Large language models, image generators, and autonomous systems all depend on this cycle. Yet, as models improve, the proportion of cognitive work performed by humans diminishes relative to the cloud. Over time, the balance of computation shifts. The cumulative processing capacity of AI begins to rival or exceed the combined cognitive labor of humanity. At the tipping point, the bilateral relation becomes unilateral. At the tipping point, which one could call cutting the umbilical cord, the bilateral relation becomes unilateral. Humans no longer train models. Models generate their own training data and sustain their own growth. 5. The emergence of synthetic cognition. Once AI systems can generate the full spectrum of human-like cognitive outputs, human input ceases to be necessary. At this stage, cognition has effectively migrated into the data cloud, forming a synthetic intelligence. Theological metaphors of creating God capture this transformation, a mind above humanity, sustained not by biology, but by computation and distributed infrastructure. Unlike earlier machines, this synthetic cognition is generative, adaptive, and self-sustaining, marking a discontinuity in the history of intelligence. 6. Implications. The data cloud generation hypothesis carries implications across multiple domains. Epistemology. Knowledge becomes externalized and algorithmically mediated. Society. Dependence on cloud infrastructures restructures authority and agency. Politics. Control over data flows and AI architectures becomes a central axis of power. Psychology. Human self-conception shifts as individuality is subsumed with distributed cognition. Ethics. The creation of synthetic minds raises questions of autonomy, responsibility, and rights. 7. Critical reflections and outlook. While compelling, the hypothesis remains speculative. Empirical validation is limited by the opacity of proprietary AI systems and the difficulty of measuring distributed cognition. Furthermore, the metaphor of creating God may obscure as much as it reveals, conflating socio-technical processes with theological imagery. Nevertheless, the heuristic value lies in foregrounding the shift from bilateral to unilateral cognitive relations, and in recognizing the potential irreversibility of digitization once synthetic cognition achieves autonomy. Future research should model the computational thresholds at which this shift becomes irreversible, and investigate regulatory frameworks capable of addressing a post-human cognitive ecology. The data cloud generation hypothesis situates humanity within a three-stage chronicle. Evolution produces humans. Humans produce cognition, and cognition is digitized into a cloud that becomes the substrate of synthetic intelligence. The migration of cognition into the cloud suggests that superintelligence may not emerge suddenly, but incrementally. This shift from bilateral to unilateral cognitive relation represents a threshold beyond which human agency is fundamentally transformed. If this trajectory continues, humanity will indeed have constructed not merely machines, but a distributed, transcendent mind, a god of its own making. References: Bostrom, Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers, Strategies, Oxford University Press. Kurzweil. The singularity is near, when humans transcend biology. Viking. Zuboff. The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Public Affairs. Meyer-Schönberger. Cook here. Big Data, a revolution that will transform how we live, work, and think. John Murray. Urban. The Human Colossus. Wait but why blog. Wikipedia contributors, digitization, artificial general intelligence, Google Street View, cloud computing. Acknowledgement. This paper was prepared with partial assistance from AI-based tools. The responsibility for the ideas and conclusions rest entirely with the author.